Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum
How you
salam.
doing today?
Alhamdulillah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. I have a huge question for you. Killer
Okay.
question.
Sure, inshallah. Bismillah.
Is Islam a feminist religion?
Unequivocally, no. Okay, for a few reasons. But I think the biggest reason, and we'll just kind of dive right into that, inshallah, is that feminism really has the basis of liberalism. And every feminist across the board, regardless of their background, whether they're a queer feminist, Marxist feminist, white feminist, doesn't really matter. Every feminist does believe in really two major premises. First one being is individual freedoms, meaning that I can do whatever I want as long as I don't harm anybody else. But essentially, I have my own individual freedom to choose to do whatever I want with my body, to say what I want, to eat what I want, to live my life how I want to. And you will find a lot of this messaging in very famous books such as Betty Friedan's Feminine Mystique. She really emphasizes this a lot, that women actually need to find their own selves in their own way. Okay, so that's the first factor. Second one being is that they believe in gender equality in terms of the material. So in Islam, we do believe in gender equality in a certain context, because equality in general does need to be contextualized, because it's not always equal. I mean, right now I'm wearing a hijab, you're not. That is clearly not equal, and that's just one of many examples. Men and women are different, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed us different rulings in different capacities and things like this that we all are aware of the fiqh. Now, in terms of the spirituality or the way that we're judged by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is equal. However, the gender equality that feminists are talking about specifically is in the material, because feminism itself is deeply rooted in materialism. Now, the true equality that Islam presents to the world, and this is something that I think a lot of feminists miss, is that real equality amongst human beings is that we are equal in non-legislation. And what I mean by that is that the human being does not have the ability to create laws from our own intellect and our own inclinations. We actually need guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to live this life in the best way possible. We need that step-by-step manual, that blueprint of life. So in reality, Islam actually does promote gender equality, but from the light that we are equal in non-legislation. Now, just flip the script a bit. The liberals will say that we are equal in our own legislation of our own selves, which is what individual freedom means. So both the concepts of individual freedom and gender equality do overlap. However, they do have their own distinctions as well. But I would say that this is the biggest reason that feminism is not coherent with Islam at all. It doesn't matter what madhab of feminism you choose to ascribe to, but they're all rooted really in self-worship and materialism, which are completely incoherent with Islam.
Yeah. So if that's the case, why do so many Muslim women go towards feminism?
Yes, great question. So a few reasons. Firstly, I think that a lot of sisters unfortunately do lack a fundamental understanding of what is Islam. Sure, if a feminist of any kind were to come and sit with me on a table, maybe we'll agree on a few things, but that does not mean that they're a Muslim, and it doesn't mean that I'm a feminist. Right? The same way that I might agree with a Christian on a few things, or a Jew on a few things, or an atheist on some things. It doesn't mean that I'm now a Muslim atheist or a Muslim Christian or anything like this. Is obviously be crazy. I don't think anybody would make these claims, but for some reason, it's not really a secret, but for some reason, quote unquote, when it comes to feminism, all of a sudden we can mesh feminism and Islam, even though they're, like I just explained, they're very opposite to one another. But Muslim women, generally speaking, based off of my interaction with Muslim women, because alhamdulillah I do a lot of grassroots work, really the biggest reason that Muslim women do turn to feminism is not only, like I said, their lack of understanding of Islam, but because they actually have a lot of pain that they experience. And unfortunately, our own community, we need to realize that maybe we're not presenting Islam in the best way possible for people to understand that Islam actually solves our problems in every way, and really solves them from a systemic and grassroots level. It's not just a band-aid solution, which is what really the West offers to a lot of women. Unfortunately, we see all of these campaigns, and there's so much corruption around it, by the way, but women's shelters, right? A lot of that money doesn't even go to the women to begin with, unfortunately. But to just, slapping a Band-Aid, we're going to make more women's shelters, is not solving women's issues, right? It's something to help them cope with their problem, but it's not a real solution. Mm-hmm. So Muslim women need to realize that Islam does solve our problems, but us as du'at need to explain that. And we need to really help sisters understand that we need to take that energy and that activism that you're doing and rechannel it back into Islam, inshallah. But really, for a lot of them, it comes from a pain point, and it comes from a suffering and an oppression that they've experienced. Mm-hmm. So when that happens, they're going to have, most of the time, an emotional reaction. And Rami, you've spoken about feminism before on your own platforms, and I'm sure you've interacted with them. But a lot of feminists are very emotional in the way that they speak about their ideas. Mm-hmm. It's very much an emotional reaction to a personal experience. Mm-hmm. Now, that's not the case for all of them. There are a lot of Muslim women who have studied and they've academically, intellectually chosen to become a feminist, and that's a different category, but that is the minority, mm-hmm. right? Now, that's the case in the West. In the East, it might be a little bit different because their lived experience is different than ours. A lot of Muslim women in the East don't actually understand what feminism even is, right? So they don't have access to the information to really understand it, maybe because there's a language barrier, mm-hmm. or things like that. So that's really the big driver most of the time, is that there's a pain point, and our community, sometimes we don't address it properly. Even I would say most of the time, we don't address women's issues properly. Mm-hmm. So that kind of pushes women away from the community, and then the liberals, who are all about compassion and understanding and acceptance, just reel them in. So then we just end up creating this one-way current of sisters moving in that direction, unfortunately.
Yeah. So what would you say to maybe the feminist that tries to flip turn the tables and say, well, I'm free, I can do what I want. You're the one who's oppressed. You're the one who is, stuck to obey certain rules and wear this hijab. I'm allowed to do what I want, and that's why I'm a feminist.
Yeah, that's a very popular one. Well, firstly, I would argue that nobody is truly free to do whatever they want. There's lots of laws in the West that stop you from doing whatever you want. So that freedom that you claim is actually limited in certain contexts. So you don't have an absolute freedom, even as a liberal living in a Western society. You don't. Nobody does. So we do have to recognize that every single person is bound by certain laws. So then the question becomes, okay, well, which laws are we going to choose to be bound to? Okay, are we going to bind ourselves to the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that are comprehensive, that are fair and just, and actually cater to our needs as a woman and as a man? Or are you going to subscribe to ever-changing laws and rights that never end, right? That every few generations they flip them around, or different contexts, they continuously change them. The standards for women are always different, right? You can easily argue that women today, in the Western context, are very unhappy, and mm-hmm. I don't even need to bring statistics for this. Just go online, go on TikTok, go on Instagram, and you will see Western women, even feminists from their own mouths, saying that, this is suffocating, or complaining about their own personal lives and just how they feel, right? Or their exhaustion, because this lifestyle is exhausting. So that's just a matter of perspective, right? This idea that, I'm free and you're oppressed. Lack of understanding and very closed-minded thing to say also. Islam really frees you from the chains of the dunya. A lot of the problems that non-Muslim women have to go through, I guess one very obvious one is the beauty standard. I do not experience that. And sometimes even personally, I come across content from non-Muslim women complaining about the beauty standard and the male gaze as well. And I simply cannot even relate to that content. Wow. I can't. Seriously. Because I'm like, it doesn't apply to me.
I feel like the feminists would find that blissful.
Yeah, like I've completely detached myself from the beauty standard. Mm-hmm. Now, I know you didn't ask this question, but I'm going to go off on this rant anyways, is that when it comes to dressing modestly, right, feminists really contradict themselves heavily on this, because they will dress modestly if it's for their own autonomy and it's for their own freedom, right, or feeling free anyways, right, freedom from the male gaze. And if a Muslim woman were to wear hijab for the same reasons that align with liberal thought, they would champion that. They would really support us. And, we saw this last year with all of the protests with burning hijab and the anti-Iran protests and all of that. We saw it last year, right? The West and most of the protests around the world actually came from Western countries, believe it or not, and they really advocated for women's right to choose to wear hijab because that's what aligns with their beliefs. But as soon as you wear hijab or dress modestly for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you say that, well, actually, I didn't choose to wear this. Sure, maybe I chose this abaya and this hijab. Okay, I chose the color because that's the bounds or the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He's put on me to choose what I wear, right? But there's certain conditions of what I'm wearing. If I wear this for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then all of a sudden I'm oppressed. And all of a sudden I don't deserve advocacy. And unfortunately, what are we seeing with Palestine right now? Right? Like I said, last year they were getting fresh haircuts in the streets, and this year they're dead silent. The international feminist community, where are they? Where are they for Palestinian women? There's 50,000 Palestinian pregnant women in Gaza right now, and they don't have access to healthcare. There are fetuses being killed. Where are the international feminist community? They're not there. Yeah. Why? Because these women are not championing freedom and choice and things that you align with, so now they just don't matter. So this really becomes the big contradiction within feminist beliefs, is that on the one hand, they believe in individual choice. Okay, great. So if I choose to be Muslim and I choose to wear my hijab for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you don't support that. Mm-hmm. And you might even impose gender equality on me because you don't support that, right? So gender equality would say that I have to take my hijab off. And that's where you get policies that occur in France or occur in India that we see all the time. Okay, and even lots of other, I think most Western nations, or at least European nations anyways, have some type of banning on Islamic clothing for women, some type of ban, right? So this is really where they contradict themselves. Either do I have the choice to be Muslim, or are you going to impose your liberalism on me? Yeah. Which one is it?
It's a good question.
Because if you believe in gender equality, actually, right, if you believe that gender equality is a source of justice, well, then you actually have to impose it. Because that's what you believe in. That's your sharia that you believe in. Yeah. So you impose it. But then you're neglecting my freedom to choose. So you see how they contradict themselves from a fundamental level? And this is why you find the feminist discourse is really all over the place. Yeah. They don't really align on anything. And there's huge dichotomy in the feminist movement around this issue.
Wow. That's a great point. That's an amazing point. Thank you so much for joining and telling me about the truth of feminism.
Alhamdulillah.